he comes on. Well, it is 4 o'clock. Why don't I know he intends on being on this call, so I mean I expect that he intends to be on this call.
My surmise is that he is a attendee.
Well, without Mary here, should he just be invited as a panelist, included in the
I
panel?
did send him the, I did make him aware that Mary Adams was not going to be present for this meeting. And
Yeah,
that
I think he volunteered.
Right, yeah, and he volunteered as well. Oh, there he is. Let me move him over.
Okay, all right. Well, let's call the meeting to order. Yeah, Alvin, are you can you hear things?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order, and the 3 members here, myself, Director Paul and Director Edwards. So we're present, convening as a full committee. Let's go first, if we can, any public comments on anything not on the agenda?
All right, so if you would like to make public comment on items not on the agenda, please raise your hand. And if you're calling in, push *9. Let's give it a few minutes here. And Director Riley, I do not see anybody with their hands raised.
Okay, we'll return it to the committee. There are no action items. These are only discussion items. So whatever we do today will be for discussion only. So Mr. GM, I'll turn it over to you for the first update.
Yeah, and not a whole lot here on the agenda. It says an update on Pure Water Monterey. I just want to let you know that we're investigating supply chain issues with respect to the pumps. So our current schedule has been both DIW3 and DIW4 come online in December. I don't have enough information to report right now, but we are eyeballing that very carefully, and I suspect it will slip a little bit because of supply chain. And I don't know if Maureen is on. Yeah, she is. I don't know, Maureen, do you want to speak up a little bit on that one?
You covered it really well. They're progressing with the rest of the construction as best as can be expected. And we've got a meeting scheduled with National Pump tomorrow, where the owner is going to be sitting in on the contractors, subcontracted supplier. And we're working on an agenda that is not offensive, but makes it clear that we would like to understand what specifically is being delayed and what's being done to mitigate that so that we don't see any more slippage.
Yep. Excellent.
Is it in the ballpark of a month's delay or longer?
Slightly longer. They said 4 to 6 weeks. But again, trying to walk the line on not ticking off the supplier and going to the back of the queue. We'd like some information on, hey, what's delayed. They have offered an upgraded material to one of the pump components. I think it's a casting, which is great at no additional cost. And if we didn't take the upgraded material, we would have seen an additional 1 month delay. So the designers checked through the material upgrade, found it to be compatible and suitable for our project. So everybody is working together, and National is also aware of the sensitivity of our schedule.
So in kind of coordinated fashion with the delivery of new wells, we also need the waste discharge permit limit increased. The permit's on a calendar year basis. It's in Monterey One Water's name, of course. And originally we'd been looking at April. And at this point, given the speed at which the Division of Drinking Water works and the regional board, who's actually in charge of this permit, how they work, I'm betting that that will not land in April, but more likely May, June. So just to manage expectations. So even with the increased well capacity, we're not going to be in a position to increase production out of the advanced water purification facility and deliveries for injection until that waste discharge permit is shifted upwards. If we begin to get a clue that it will be issued, let's say in June, we can start injecting water in anticipation because, as I said, the permit's on a calendar year basis, so we can kind of front run it a little bit. But these are things that there are many chefs in the kitchen, and we just have to wait until we get the approval to increase. Right now, it's a 3,700 acre feet per year limit. It's trying to be raised to 4,300 acre feet per year, which would then allow us to add anywhere from 400 to 500 additional acre feet from the plant that it's capable of producing right now, for which we don't actually have a buyer. But Caliam has expressed an interest in getting that additional water for these next couple of years. And at the Water Demand Committee meeting on Thursday, that committee will begin to see why that's an important feature of the plant, beginning not necessarily this fiscal year, this water year, but it would be helpful in this water year as well. But it's going to be crucial in the next 2 water years. So we've got to get that work done.
Is this the State Water Board permit or?
Yeah, so the waste discharge permit is actually the Regional Water Quality Control Board out of SLO, which, as you know, are part of the State Water Resources Control Board purview, but it's really through them regionally. Different set of people than the Division of Drinking Water, but a lot of them overlap, and we have both of them in on our meetings with Monterey One Water to discuss things like the tracer test and all that. So they're both the Division of Drinking Water, which is the old, whatever it was, it used to be in public health and now it's in the state board. And then the regional is, I think there's 7 regions in the state or 9 regions in the state. 9. And so that, there's crossover, but believe it or not, we're taking this highly finished pure water and it's still subject to a waste discharge permit as if it's waste. So that's the regional board.
Sorry, I had an interruption there.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility that John Laird might be able to make a phone call?
If we had him make phone calls for everything people suggest to make phone calls on, yeah, no, you got to pick your battles. And this one, I don't foresee it as crucial if it looks like they're staying on the timeline that we kind of anticipate right now. The state moves slowly, or the state doesn't move at all in certain cases. But this is not one to burn an ask on, in my opinion.
And I would ask. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, Dave. If there are no other questions or comments, we'll go to the next item. But I'll slow down just enough to see if there are other comments or questions. Okay.
No, for me, my feelings are already hurt, so. I knew it was gonna happen.
And I would like to remind the public, if you would like to make public comment on item number 1, please raise your hand or push *9. I don't see anybody with their hands raised. So
All
I'll
right,
return
thanks.
this back to the committee.
Thank you, Joe. Let's go to item number 2 in the Fort-Ord replacement well.
John, why don't you start with the destruction of the well and where that's at, and then I'll fill in a little bit on the other stuff.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Dave. So actually, just today, we got our contract that was approved by the full board at the last board meeting, got it back from administrative review, and it was sent to the contractor for signature. And then I registered the project as a public works project with the state, so they can track it for prevailing wage. Next step will be to receive the signed contracts, and the contract language states that after the contract are signed, the destruction work will be completed within 45 days. So the time for the contracts to be exchanged and then start the clock on 45 days. And I believe that Majora will, they, in a conversation I've had with Mike, he just plans on, when he gets the contract signs, mobilizing and getting it done, since he already has trucks down in this area working on pure water Monterey.
John, who owns the property that has this well on it?
The address is Seaside, but it's on the Presidio. It's the housing that is just south of Light Fighter. I believe that the Army controls that land, even though the address is Seaside.
Yeah, I was just curious. Well, are there any questions by committee members or other things to add? Dave, you said you were going to come in on the other side.
Right. So you saw in the packet the most recent letter from the water master regarding this well. It's a little bit more of a smorgasbord of topics covered in the letter about our duties and other things. There's some backstory to some of the statements that are made. Nevertheless, I have been in touch with Rem Scherzinger at Marina Coast Water District, but we haven't discussed this topic recently. I need to call him again and get them engaged, because our request to both the water master and to Marina Coast was, hey, it's between you guys to figure out who's going to be a project manager and what what your anticipated funding formula might be before we take any further. In this letter, Paul Bruno seems to be saying, hey, this needs to get back in front of the board, And I would advise you that it doesn't until we hear back from Marina Coast Water District. So I'll add that as a as a to-do this week to close the loop with REM and see if they have a proposal. We certainly don't want to get into the role of project manager and take on yet another project at this point in time. We do have a new water resources employee coming on. John, what's the date for that?
We sent out the letter to the top candidate. Should he accept the offer of employment, the start date will be November 1.
November 1. And he's not a project person. He's going to be water quality, stream flow gauging, a lot of the stuff that soon to be retired Greg is leaving us at the end of December. So we don't, in my opinion, we don't have the capacity to tap project management for this, especially if we have a limited interest. One thing I did want to note is there have been occasions in the past where the Seaside Water Master has simply footnoted wells coming out of usage and being destroyed. There were 2 wells that used to be part of their network that have been destroyed and are no longer monitored and were not replaced. And so there's some inconsistency here in saying that this one absolutely needs to be replaced when there are other Sentinel wells that are more coastal driven. But nevertheless, we need to hear from Marina Coast Water District. My recommendation is it does not go straight back to the board until we have at least one more discussion at the committee level once we hear back from Marina Coast. So that's about all I have.
Can we have this ready for November board meeting? Is that enough time for you?
Yeah, I think so, because I would expect it to be back at the November, first week of November water supply planning. So, yeah.
Okay, and can we start giving Paul Bruno invitations to when we discuss this so they can show up or not show up, but we got it on record that we invited you. So
Got
can we do that?
Karen?
Well, just for clarification, I have a few things I'd like clarified, but just
Okay.
what exactly would we be bringing before the board in November? I mean, just because Paul Bruno says we need, that's not a good enough reason for me, but if there's a good reason, I just like,
No, I think that it would only be if we reach some form of agreement on a funding level, because, as I've said, the deep well still works. We still monitor it. It's part of the monitoring plan. John told you what's going to be the disposition of this shallow well. And so, we have the luxury of just saying hands off. But because we've made an offer to possibly participate in the financing, we just need to hear what, Marina Coast has staff, has experience. The water master really doesn't. So I think they were kind of punting it back in our direction rather than acting on it. So if we're in a position, then maybe we go to the board with okay, the parties have talked. We're looking at, 15%, 20%, 30%, whatever the number is. Here's what that budget is expected to be. But because we're not going to lead this parade, I don't even think they'll have a budget by the November Water Supply Planning Committee meeting. So it may just be one where we just, we're not taking an action at the board level. But we'll
just an update.
Yeah, just an update.
Okay, Paul Bruno kicks up an awful lot of dust in this letter and makes all these insinuations and accusations that we're not doing our job. So I would just like, well, you don't have to do a blow by blow, but whose responsibility is it to monitor that the seawater intrusion in that area?
Yeah, so let me just emphasize that I was grateful that Paul underlined the word management in Water Management District to kind of remind us that that seems to be our role. But so there are a number of wells that are specifically designed to be sentinel wells for seawater intrusion. This one's a little further inland, and the cross-contamination between the sand dunes formation and this formation seems to have come from the north, which would not be a complete indicator of seawater intrusion. But it is in an area that ought to be monitored, I think, for purposes of the Marina Coast's Groundwater Sustainability Agency position. They absolutely will need to monitor. John, I don't know if I think you've told me before who's got the requirements, but what are the water master's options with this well?
When the water master was first formed, there was developed what's called a maintenance plan that it lays out required monitoring, and that plan was submitted and accepted by Monterey County Superior Court. So the schedule of the wells and the monitoring of the wells is a court accepted document. I guess you could go back to the court and change the document if you wanted to not include that well. But right now it is, and as I read it, I'm not the one reading. I'm not the water master reading it, but as I read it, it seems to say that that's a required monitoring point.
Yeah. So, and again, you said you didn't want to go blow by blow, and I'll try not to. But our statement about that there are no data or reports that support the possibility of active seawater intrusion in the Paso is true. And when Mr. Bruno cites our own consultants, Montgomery and Associates, that is incorrect. They're not our consultants. They are the water master's consultants. They have provided work for the SEIR and Pure Water Monterey modeling, but they're not our consultants. So there's just, it's kind of woven with various things, as you point out, Director Paul, that we could spend a lot of time talking about. But at the end of the day, I think there's benefit to having shallow monitoring at that site, but those benefits primarily benefit others. But the Seaside Water Master could say, we're going to survive without it as a data point and take it off their list and their program. You know, the folks who pay the most at the Seaside Water Master that are on the hook, typically it's Cal Am, because they're the majority participant and funder. I'm not even sure that we've had enough discussion with Cal Am. I do see that Tim O'Halloran is on, but you know, at some point we'll need to circle back with them as a Water Master participant, what their take on it is.
Do we need the well to monitor for seawater intrusion? Do we need it or we don't need it? Because reading in these letters, you know, the threat of seawater intrusion comes, the district got to be looking out for it, and that on that end.
Yeah, John, what's your take on that?
I think that it's, you would see seawater in wells before that, because it is so far inland. So it's nice to have it, but if you were setting up a seawater intrusion network, you wouldn't choose to put a well that far back. You'd put it closer to the coast.
Yeah.
And can we recommend that? That we put it?
I think if
Yeah,
you wanted to make that a recommendation, that could go through the Water Master Technical Advisory Committee.
But I think there already is one on kind of the same longitude, but further west, which is why when there was no detect at that well, but a detection at the Fort Ord number 9 shallow, it was a little bit head scratching, which is why we said the influence would have come from the north or just this cross contamination between the dune sands and the Paso.
So the next well, if we get seawater intrusion in it, who will be responsible for destroying it? Us or would somebody else? How do we look at that?
Yeah, it all depends on ownership and, you know, ultimately. And then you get back to of course, the issue of who can afford to pay. You know, we do have revenue sources. The Seaside Water Master does have revenue, but it's just basically a tax on all of its members or primary members. So, you know, we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. If it's an actual seawater intrusion detection and signifies that the front has come basically onto land, you know, I think Paul's letter somewhere says it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Then there's a whole variety of other things that have to happen. It won't just be about the well, but it'll be about pumping limits and you know, mitigations. There is a plan in place that when seawater intrusion is determined to have happened, the frequency of testing goes up, and you know, ultimately the physical solution may be to decrease pumping even further and so forth. But you know, again, this was much ado about nothing because of the cross-contamination, if you will. It was not seawater intrusion.
That's what I thought you had told us, yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Who's that?
No, that was me. Just
go ahead.
one question to Mr. Laredo. Mr. Laredo, is there any way we can get out of this or protect ourselves anymore on it or get involved in it? Like I think the chair over there trying to get us really involved in this, and comments from the public, we should be involved in this. What can we do to protect ourselves?
I'm not sure that we're, I'm not sure that we need protection, to tell you the truth.
Good, okay.
Yeah, I don't have a map in front of me. I know there was discussion at one of the water master meetings a couple months ago. And I think it was, so the source was Cal-Am suggesting a different well location that seems like southwest, I'm going to say southwest of the FO9 well, but it's somewhere within the basin, I think, that there was a pretty large open space between some of the well locations. And I think Cal-Am was suggesting that if we're going to have a monitoring effort somewhere, this area may be the higher priority area. And I don't remember that discussion being in relation to, the Fort Ord well 9, but it was in relation to detecting any change in the groundwater levels and then, or seawater intrusion. So I'm just wondering if the water master is suggesting any particular locations, and that may help determine what role, whether it's Marina Coast or us having a larger role to play.
No, that's, and good memory, because that discussion did occur. I can't remember if it was originated by Cal-Am or not, but yeah, we kind of looked at that real estate in that area, and that discussion did happen. I think we're back to, we got to get Marina. I know this is probably a low level item for Marina Coast. Their GM is only 3 months old, I think at this point, 3 or 4. But we need to get him engaged, or one of his deputies engaged. So, I don't think that the water master alone, because that's all we've had right now is letters and soundings from the water master. I think we need to hear from some others, and so we'll do that, beating the bushes here this week.
Yeah, just one closing comment from me. The way I've been reading this, if the water master is not going to be in charge of planning this thing out, I don't know why they're trying to stir us up that, if you don't want to take the lead, we don't want you to take the lead. I don't want you to take the lead. But somebody, the way their chair is hitting us, Paul Bruno is hitting us, it sounds like he wants somebody to be in charge.
Yeah.
And, so please refer it back to them and say, we're not going to be in charge. We're going to update the board. We want to help you as much as possible. I don't even know if we want to do that. Since Mr. Laredo just said we shouldn't have nothing to worry about. But we need to discuss it at the board level so we can get it moving along and talk to Marina Coast. So, and put our sentiments that, hey, we're not going to be in charge and we're looking for a plan if y'all want us to help. So that's my comments on it. And a report on November meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have nothing to add. I think it's been a good discussion, and then some of the questions are being raised by you, Dave, but also Karen, all of us. I just think it's too early to kind of line up in any one particular direction until somebody, and I think it's the water master, ought to be presenting more of a specific approach to the problem so that we know what we're dealing with. Otherwise, it's just all crapshoot and we're all just playing without knowing what the rules are.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's a,
What it sounds like, yeah.
yeah, sentiment. Do we have any other comments on this? Otherwise, we'll go to the next item. Well, I'll just remind Joel, but also the public, if there are any comments, we'll accept them anytime, but just make sure you check in so we can recognize you. Let's go to item number 3 in Rule 160.
So this is, I think, fairly self-descriptive in the staff note. You may recall at our last board meeting, John did make a presentation. We went through the annual cycle of approving basically the water budget for the next water year, as well as the first quarterly water budget. But John, during that meeting, did point out that traditionally the water resource system had been, in essence, just the combination of the Carmel River and the Seaside Basin. And now we are seeing, obviously the impacts of Pure Water Monterey, ASR, Sand City Desal has been around, over a decade at this point. And so to better understand what's going on with the resource system, we need to start including all water supply that's available in the discussion. And so John's suggestion is for this committee to recommend that the board go through the ordinance process, a first read and a second read whenever it's ready. I think I may have mentioned before, I don't think John's ever written an ordinance. Around here these days, it's primarily Stephanie Locke has been the ordinance writer. Larry, I believe, has done one. But anyway, we'll coach him up. But I think to add clarity to the tables is really important. We did come in several months ago and add a footnote to one of the tables because the district's conservation and rationing plan refers to the tables as basically as a definition of how much water we are producing in a year. And again, if you're only referring to the river and referring to the Seaside Basin, those are by law decreasing amounts. And so it makes us artificially look like we need to go into rationing because it doesn't include Pure Water Monterey production and ASR production and so forth. So I think this is an opportunity for a couple of reasons to clean up the Rule 160 in the tables 15, 1, 2, and 3. John, do you need to add anything to that?
No, I think that that's right. It's kind of trying to restore the functionality of the rule that is kind of falling apart as we're switching to water resources projects, and that's the point.
Well, here's the question. When is it going to be ready? October or November?
Oh boy. John, how many ordinances have you written?
We did the zone of no well drilling ordinance just recently. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you got a flavor for it then. Yeah, I would say November, probably not October.
Okay, sound good.
Yeah.
And Dave, if I could ask, I think I saw an email, but I don't know who all it went to, and maybe you saw it, but it was one of the Marina Coast attorneys. I've forgotten his name. It's not their #1 attorney, but he wrote about various calculations of how to count water availability. Did you see that? I don't know if that has any bearing on what we're doing here in this rule change.
I don't recall seeing it. I don't know if it was a while ago. If I was on the distribution list, I would have it. But yeah, it's less so. I mean, let's just take quickly as an example. If you go to the exhibit, even the very first table, it makes you feel as though there's only 5,500 or 5,600 acre feet in the system. And as we all know, our demand has tracked at right around 9,700 acre feet the last 5 years. So call it 96 to 9,800 acre feet. So you just simply want, intuitively, you would expect that the sum of your monthly targets equaling up to a whole year would roughly equal 9,800 acre feet. And so, it's obvious something's missing in here, but it's not obvious what that is. And so, John's proposal is to bring in all the other resources to these tables so that they make a little more sense. I think the second table, which has been been zero for quite some time now. This is the Laguna Seca sub area, I believe. We should just get rid of this. There's some silliness. So, but I think that whatever Marina Coast might say about how you count, we will do what we do. I mean, right now we deliver to you every board meeting, an estimate of production for customer service. So that's basically at all of the wells or at the wall at the Sand City desal plant. So, that's how much water has to be produced and put into the distribution system to meet customer demand. There will be losses and there'll be unaccounted for water along the way. But, we know how to count those sources, but we just need to get them into the table so that, it's no longer missing something. So again, not to dodge the Marina Coast accounting, whatever they might have said, but we do pretty good accounting. I mean, the numbers that John has are the numbers that Cal-Am uses. So we're always on top of them. There's some back adjustments that are made almost, regularly, certainly on a yearly basis. But, as long as Cal-Am and we are in agreement, then if we represent it more correctly, then, that'll be the go-to source. This will be meaningful going forward, where it's lost all its meaning with the changes that have taken place.
Yeah, I'm glad to see the direction you're going in, you and John, on this. Other comments or questions from the committee?
Sounds to me like it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't, our most glamorous water supply planning committee meeting. This is more some nuts and bolts of stuff, but it does make sense.
And you're gonna run that ordinance through Cal-Am to see what their thoughts are, to make sure.
Well,
they're happy.
yeah, and I think what's interesting is, Cal-Am actually flagged it early on because the conservation and rationing plan has a production trigger. And they were looking at that saying, what's written in your law, isn't that going to trigger rationing? And we went in and we looked at it, which is why we came to you with a resolution to modify the notes in the table itself. And that's why the first table now has the last sentences, or the last single sentence: for purposes of Rule 163A3 and Rule 164A3, the annual production limit shall add the production of all water supply projects. So when we get a draft together, certainly as a courtesy, we'll let Cal-Am look at what we're doing. But this was an identified need that's been kicking around for some time.
That sounds good to me. Again, if there are no other questions, we will, cleaning up where there might be confusion is always a good step forward. So glad to see this. Let's jump to items to be placed on future agendas. Again, I welcome public comment on anything on what we've talked about, or
So we do have
ideas.
one person with their hand raised.
Okay,
Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Directors, could you see the timer?
Yes,
And John Tully, when you're ready, please present your comment. John? You should be able to make your public comment.
well, let's give John the chance to come on. I think we can still talk a little bit about any future items, but when John gets on, speak up, John, so we hear you, and then we'll go to you. So from the committee standpoint, any particular items of interest to be placed on future agendas? Yeah, I don't have any either. So John,
I'll-
come on.
Yeah. I
Good
wanna
for you,
make sure-
George.
Yeah. I'm going to want to make sure that whatever the results of the meeting that Marine's participating in tomorrow with the suppliers, that we report back on that. But I guess, we're kind of in a standing item that update on Pure Water Monterey is going to remain standing, especially now that we appear to be doing the expansion. So I've got nothing.
John,
new to-
John, if you're on the phone, please push *9 so I know which number to unmute. I'm gonna go ahead and allow the number ending in 760 to speak.
Like that might not be him.
Right, the number ending in 754. I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself, so you'll need to push *6.
Go.
Hi, Joel.
Yes. Let me go ahead and share my screen now. Let me share the timer. Directors, are you able to see the timer here?
Only your
No.
screen.
No, we see your desktop. There we go.
Okay. When you're ready, John, please present your comment.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your patience. I phoned in. I was also on Zoom. I don't have a camera nor a microphone on my computer here at work, so thanks for going to the phone call for me. I have a simple request I'd like to make, and that is that when the word demand is being used, that be substituted and taken out and be in supply and use be substituted instead of demand. I think it's a real serious misnomer and a misleading misnomer to say that the demand in this area is the same as use, be it 9,000 acre feet, be it at 5,000 acre feet. What we have happening here is that the community uses every drop that's supplied. That is use. There is demand beyond that use. There are legal lots of records. There is a lot of demand beyond that use, and we all know that. And what I'm real concerned about is the community is being set up, if I may say even gaslighted, to believe that the demand in this area is being met. I know we're going to be seeing charts over the next coming years that show that, gee, look, the community used X, and that's how much we supplied, therefore we have satisfied demand. And we all know that is not the case in terms of demand. What has been satisfied is simply use. So if we could start to look at that terminology differently, I'd appreciate it. I think everybody would. I'd also encourage this supply committee to begin planning for a supply should there not be rainfall. These redundancies are necessary. What we're seeing right now with Pure Water Monterey is that there's concerns about production, that there's still a lot of moving parts on Pure Water Monterey, both phase 1 and phase 2. And having all of our eggs in the basket of rainfall, really is how I see it. I think a lot of us do, is deeply concerning. And I think it's the charge of this committee to be planning for the possibility that Pure Water Monterey and rainfall don't sufficiently supply for the demand, or even in this case, possibly the use of this community. So if I could ask for those two things to happen, stop using the word demand and use the word use, and also begin to plan for the possibility that actually the inevitability that we will not have sufficient rainfall to provide ASR, and there'll be other distinct impacts on the Seaside Basin and beyond for our water supply. Thank you very much, and thanks for your good work.
Yeah, thank you, John. I'm glad we fought through the technical stuff too, and thank you for your comments. And your
Yeah, Director Riley, I should tell you that there is a topic on the Water Demand Committee agenda, which will be on the water supply planning agenda next month. The problem is, by having this meeting on the 4th of October, there was absolutely no chance that we were going to get the end of the water year numbers. And so I want to pair it with the end of the water year discussion. But what Mr. Tilley raised is of huge import to us less from a long-term water planning basis, but certainly in the next 3 years while we're waiting on the expansion project to get built. And I think it's important that you see those numbers and you understand the sensitivity of those numbers to rainfall and the limitations on what stored water we presently have, because it's going to be an interesting 2.5 years trying to make ends meet. And that is an important discussion. So that's kind of the second half of his comments. The front half, there's no way we'll stop using the word demand and start using the word use. As an industry, it's supply and demand. And, we'll just, unless you want me to start using the production for delivery to customer service, which is a much lengthier phrase. And keep in mind too, that there's also difficulties in the number. So really what John reports and what I report at the general manager's report is production basically at the wellhead and the plant. There will be losses at the Begonia iron treatment removal facility. There will also be line losses in the ground, just going to the customers' homes. So we also every year get a consumption report. So when you see me showing pie charts of Monterey's usage versus Seaside's versus Sand City and so forth, that's actually from consumption reports. And if you added up the total consumption in a year and compared it to the total production for the year, they're two different numbers. And that's because of losses and unaccounted for water and the truck that hit the fire hydrant, those kinds of things. But so we use them in different venues for different purposes, but typically the production for delivery to customer service is the number. And it'll even be different than what Cal-Am reports in some of their required reporting, because up until next year, withdrawals from the river for El Paso that is just put into the general use have to be counted as if they're Cal-Am's Carmel River diversions. The first 600 acre feet of diversion to aquifer storage and recovery get counted as if they're just Cal-Am's Carmel River diversions.
Mr. Stoll, I'm
going
to interrupt for a moment because this is a general comment on matters for future agenda.
Yeah. So anyway, we're not going to bring all the different counting methodologies ever back to you, but we're still going to call production for customer service demand. And I guess we'll just have to keep reminding our public.
So in summary, you're going to bring another aspect of this issue back to us.
Yeah, you've got two things you really do need to be concerned about, which is how do we get from December 31st of 2021, which is the last step down under the cease and desist order, to the first day of flipping the switch on Pure Water Monterey expansion, which is then permanent replacement water supply. And it's going to be eye-opening to look at those numbers.
And this is going to be an ongoing series of reports you give us anyway, because we're going to be watching the rainfall. We're going to be watching all sorts of, level of stream flow, you name it.
Yeah.
It's going to be an active reporting year, even though it may or may not be an active rain season.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's gonna rain.
Well, we really do. This is why I think it's funny. We've talked about it, but the drought word has been bandied about, and we don't call it a drought unless it's 2 years in a row. For that reason, Director Edwards, you can solve a lot with one rainy season. And so, if you can make it through and things are a little tight, it's not a drought. It's just a dry year, or in this case, a critically dry year. But if you have 2 in a row, it's a drought. So.
Well, and then I'm just going to ask the other committee members to just check your brain every once in a while to see if there's a question that deserves some attention by this committee, and we'll see what we want for some future discussions. I do that occasionally, but I didn't do it for today, so I have nothing to suggest. Okay, if there are no more comments, I think we've covered the waterfront, according to Dave Laredo, more than necessary. So we'll see.
All
Okay.
right.
Right.
Thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave, just for information, I'm going to try to dig up that email and see if I can send it to you.
Yeah, because there's been so many different topics that they've shown an interest in, but yeah, I'd like to see it if